The following is a summary of the Sicha of Shabbos Parshas Pinchas Tov Shin Nun. The Yemei Bein HaMetzorim, the days between Shiva Asa B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av this year, are special because they take place after Chatzos Hayoim of the Elef Hashishi. 5,750 is already after half day on the day of Friday going into the next millennium, that of Mashiach. And in that year, Tov Shin Nun, Shivasa B'Tammuz and also Tisha B'Av were on Tuesday of the week, and Tuesday is a day, a Yom Shehuchbel Bei Kitov. It's blessed with double goodness. In addition to the fact that we have the promise that Yehavchu Yomim Elu L'Sosun L'Simcha, that these days will be transformed into days of rejoicing, Shiva Asar is also the Gematria Tov, that it's good in the sense that it will be transformed into good. And Huchbel Bei Kitov, it's on a Tuesday where it has a double good. The two goods are, number one, it's L'Chatchila good, and number two, that darkness is transformed into light and bitterness into sweet, the second and higher form of goodness. This is emphasized on the Shabboses of the Bein HaMetzorim, which these Shabboses are the concept of Hikdim Refuah Lamaka, that the cure comes before the strike. Dinim of Avelus do not apply on Shabbos. On Shabbos, Ein Etzev Ba, there is to be no sadness on Shabbos. On the contrary, Shabbos, there needs to be Oineg Shabbos, pleasure and delight, and Simcha and joy. And in fact, in the Shabboses of the 3 weeks, one needs to have additional joy on these Shabboses in order to be shoylel, to make sure that there shouldn't be any trace of the sadness of these days. The day of Shabbos itself reflects that time to come. It's a Yom which is of Menucha, which reflects the Yom Shekuloi Menucha, the day of all tranquility as it will be, and as we say in Birchas HaMazon. And these 21 days will be transformed into Ach Tov V'Chesed, only good and kind days. Ach is the Gematria 21, as is Mudgesh, as it's emphasized, in fact, in that year in Tov Shin Nun, when Shabbos Parshas Pinchas was on the 21st of Tammuz in that year. Again, Ach Tov. It's also emphasized in the Sedra, the Parsha of Pinchas, because Pinchas ze Eliyahu, and Eliyahu is the harbinger of the redemption. He's the Mevaser HaTov. In the Parsha itself, the Parsha starts off, Hinin Noisen Loi es Brisi Shalom. He's given the covenant of peace. And that's the whole idea of Eliyahu Hanavi, who comes to make peace in the world. And peace, Shalom, is mevatel, it annuls the Sibas HaGolus, the reason of Golus in the first place, which is Sinas Chinam, baseless hatred, and Ahavas Chinam, love for no reason, bringing peace, takes away the reason and the cause of Golus. And at the end of Parshas Pinchas, we have the discussion of the Moyadim, the transformation and uplifting days of Yomim Tovim, which hints to the fact that these days will be transformed into a Yom Tov, and Lahoyer, the number of Yomim Tovim, of days of Yom Tov in the year, is also 21, which is the idea of Ach Tov. Now, we said beforehand that these Shabboses are a concept of Makdim Refuah Lamaka, that the cure comes before the strike. Seemingly, that's not consonant with the name which we give these Shabboses. We call them the Tlasa de Puranusa, the 3 Shabboses of punishment, named after the Haftorah which we read on these Shabbosos. In fact, the Shiva de Nechemta, the 7 Haftorahs of consolation, we only read after these 3 weeks. But during these 3 weeks, seemingly, the Puronus, the punishment, is not consonant with the idea of Shabbos being a refuah to the Makkah. It's well known that these 3 weeks correspond to the Gimel Moichin, the 3 brains of Chochmah, Bina, and Das, and the Shiva de Nechemta correspond to the 7 Midos. And therefore, Puranusa, we can actually translate not in its negative connotation of punishment, but Puranusa coming from the etymological root of paroi, of Kedusha, which it says in Zohar, De'isperiu le kol nahorin, that Paroi had revealed before him in his holy root all the supernal lights. And this idea is that during these 3 Shabbos we have in the Gimel Moichin, in Chochmah, Bin, and Das, the highest revelations. This is also hinted to in the 3 parshias which we read during this time, Matos, Masei, and Devarim. The Tzad HaShova Shabohem, what is equal in all of them, is we read about the inheritance of the land. In Parshas Matos, we read about the Bnei Gad and Bnei Ruvain. In Parshas Masei, we read about the inheritance. And in Parshas Devarim, it says, Re'ei nosati lochem es ha'aretz, see, I've given you this land. And it's talking about the inheritance of the entire Eretz Yisrael, including also the lands of Keni, Knizi, and Kadmoni, which, as explained in Chassidus, correspond to the 3 Moichin of Chachma, Bina, and Das. And therefore, when we have the 17th of Tammuz, Tov Tammuz, on a Tuesday, which is Huchbel Beiki Tov, on Parshas Pinchas, and the Shiur Chumash of this day is talking about the division of the land, therefore, we can learn something from the Parsha. The division of the land was in 3 ways. Number 1, it was in a form of Nachla, a Yerusha. Number 2, it followed Seichel and Tam, because it says, L'rav tarba nachalosa, according to the many you should divide. And number 3 was Al Pi HaGoral, it was according to the lot. These 3, Chelek, Goral, and Yerusha, correspond to what we say in davening, Ashreina Matov Chalkeinu Manoim Goraleinu Mayofa Yerushaseinu, which our avodah in these 3 speedens the Geula, and it speedens in it in a way which we will inherit the entire land, including also the 3 of Keni, Knizi, Kadmoni, Chochmah, Bin, and Das, the whole of Eretz Yisrael, as it will be Le'osid Lavai. The fusion of Matos and Masei, the Alter Rebbe explains in Likutei Torah that Eila Masei B'nei Yisrael, even though Masei is plural and the actual going out of Mitzrayim was only 1 journey, the Alter Rebbe explains that in fact all the journeys were a continuum of going out of the constraints and limitations of Egypt, of Mitzrayim, including the very last journey. Matos talks about the nullification of vows, which the idea is taking something which was negative and transforming it by uprooting it from its very beginning. And this is also emphasized in the story of the Benois Tzelavchad, where Rashi says that their ancestors were Menashe ben Yosef, and Yosef was the one who loved Eretz Yisrael. In fact, Yosef, we have a connection also with the number 17. He was Ben Shva Esrei Shana when the story happened. Yosef is the Sephira of Yesod, and this is the Midah just before, which brings the Geula. So Yosef, being 17, is the idea of the transformation of everything that would happen in the descent to Egypt to good. Similarly, we find by Yaakov, Vayechi Yaakov Shva Esrei Shana, that Yaakov lived the 17 best years of his life in Mitzrayim. So Yaakov and Yosef, the Torah mentions the number 17, which is good by both of them, and all Yidden have the name either Yaakov or Yosef, Roye Yisra, Roye Hatzain Yosef. So both of them emphasize this transformation of Golus to Geula. Now we know that the three Avos, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, correspond to Torah, Avodah, and Gemilas Chasadim. Yaakov refers specifically to Torah because there is an advantage in Torah over the other two, that Torah is an obligation on a person at all times, day and night. V'hagisa boy yomam v'layla. And even on Tisha B'Av, a person is obligated to learn Torah, albeit matters which are permitted to be learned then. And Yisrael is the Rosh Tevis Yesh Shishim Ribi Oisias La Torah. So when we think of Eila told us Yaakov Yosef, this is the Nesinas Koyach, the empowerment through Limud Torah, that Yosef Hashem li bein Acher, that through Torah we can take one who is an Acher, one who is outside, and bring them through Torah into a Bein, transforming Golus into Geula. This, of course, has tremendous connection to our generation, in which the month of Tammuz was the day of Yud Beis Tammuz. The Geula of the Nasi, Hanasi hu Akoil, and the Geula of the entire generation. As the Frierdiker Rebbe said, Lo oisi bilvad goel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not only me did Hashem redeem on Yud Beis Tammuz, but all Yidden. And this year, meaning in the year Tafshinun, is 110 years, which in fact was the complete years of Yosef. And his avodah is to transform the Acher into a Ben through the teaching of Torah and Chassidus, and especially through 10 Yidden who sit and learn Torah. And, as we find in the Parsha, Pinchas was Mizarei Shel Yosef, he descended from Yosef, and Pinchas is also Begematria Yitzchak, and that's the name of the Frierdiker Rebbe, Yosef Yitzchak. Yosef Hashem Shenis Yodoi, Hashem will again stretch forth his hand and take Yidden out of Golus, and Yitzchak, Ozimale Schaypinu, then there will be tremendous simcha. Hamaisa hu Iker, the deed is the principle. We need to add in Limud Torah, and especially the halachas of Torah, Tziyim B'Mishpat Tipada, especially Rambam, and especially on Shabbos when we gather Yidden together, especially to learn Pirkei Avos, Moshe Kibbel Torah Misinai, when we read it anew, a chidush, and in a way of raising Talmidim Harbe, many Talmidim, in a way of Oihev Shalom, in a way of Avas Chinam, and in a way Al Shloisha Devarim Ha'olam Omeid, and also especially in this time learning the Hilchas Beis HaBechira and making Siyumim in the 9 days. V'yehi Rotzein, through all of this activity, already we will be able to fulfill that which it says, Loi Yachel Devorei, that Hashem will keep his promise and he will take Yidden out of Golus with Mashiach Tzidkenu B'karev Mamash.